The decision that changed everything. The auditorium was silent. Not the kind of silence that comes from boredom, but the kind that happens right before something important is about to happen. Sundar stood backstage, his hands cold despite the heat of the lights. He could hear the crowd murmuring, waiting, expecting. This was his moment. He had waited years for it. And now, as the host walked toward the mic, he thought of her. Her name was Anjali. They had met many years ago, in a time when dreams were bigger than logic and love was stronger than fear. They were both students, sitting across from each other in a cramped engineering classroom in India. Sundar remembered how she used to take notes so fast he could barely keep up just by watching her pen move. At first, they were just classmates, quiet, respectful, focused. But in the library, while studying late one night, he offered her a coffee. She smiled. That was the beginning. They didn't fall in love quickly. It happened slowly, like rain soaking into dry earth. They talked about everything, their dreams, their families, the pressure they felt to succeed, their fears of not being good enough. Sundar was always the quiet one, observing more than speaking. Anjali was fire and spark. She believed in things before they existed, including him. Years passed. They graduated. Job offers came. Sundar moved to the United States for a scholarship. Anjali stayed behind. Distance tested them, but they held on. They called every night. They made promises no one believed they could keep. And they kept them. Then came the moment that changed everything. Sundar had been offered a job at a small company that was trying to compete with giants. The company was called Google. It wasn't big yet. No one knew if it would survive. It was risky. It was uncertain. But Sundar believed. One night, he called Anjali from his tiny apartment. His voice was quiet. "I think this could be something big," he said. "Then do it," she replied, without hesitation. "But I need to give it everything. I need time, energy, focus. I won't be able to visit for a while, and ... There's one more thing." "What?" He paused. "They want me to move again, to a new city. And it's going to be hard. Really hard." She didn't speak for a moment. Then she said, "I'll come with you." Sundar was shocked. "But what about your job?" "My job will still be there in some form. Your dream won't wait. If you believe in it, I believe in you." And just like that, she packed her bags. She left behind her job, her family, her friends, for him, for his dream. At first, they struggled. They shared a tiny apartment with almost nothing in it. Some nights, they ate only instant noodles. Sundar worked long hours. He came home exhausted, sometimes not speaking. Anjali started feeling invisible. She missed her own dreams. She missed her country, but she never complained. Not once. And then, one night, everything fell apart. They were in the kitchen. Sundar was checking emails while Anjali cooked. She turned to say something, but he didn't hear her. She repeated it. Nothing. Finally, she slammed the pot down. "Do you even see me anymore?" she asked, her voice trembling. He looked up, confused. "What do you mean?" "I left everything for you," she whispered. "But I'm not sure you even notice." He walked over to her, eyes full of guilt. "I notice everything. But I don't know how to say thank you without feeling like it's not enough." That night, they sat together on the floor, no furniture between them, no distractions. They talked for hours about pain, about sacrifice, about love. Sundar promised her something that night. He promised that one day, when he had the chance, he would tell the world about what she did for him. He would not let her love be invisible. And now, all these years later, standing backstage, about to speak in front of thousands, that moment was here. He looked down at the small piece of paper in his hand. The speech he had written and rewritten 100 times. His fingers trembled slightly as he took a deep breath. "You ready?" The host asked. Sundar nodded, but in his mind, he was back in that kitchen. Hearing her voice, feeling the weight of what she had done, he stepped into the light. The applause began, but no one, not even Anjali sitting in the front row. knew what he was about to reveal. Astra Sundar takes the stage and reveals a truth no one expected lights. Above were so bright that Sundar couldn't see the crowd clearly. Just shadows and outlines, a sea of waiting eyes. But he didn't need to see their faces. He could feel the weight of their anticipation pressing against his chest like a slow, steady heartbeat. Somewhere in that darkened room, Anjali was sitting. In the front row, her hands folded in her lap, quiet, waiting, maybe nervous, maybe remembering. His footsteps echoed as he walked across the polished floor. His shoes made a sharp sound in the silence that followed the applause. It wasn't just a conference. It was one of the biggest events in the tech world that year. Executives, engineers, journalists, dreamers, all gathered to hear what Sundar Pichai, now the CEO of one of the most powerful companies on earth, would say next. He reached the center of the stage and stood behind a simple podium. The mic adjusted itself with a soft whir. He looked down for a moment at the speech he had written, pages filled with numbers, strategies, plans for the future. All safe, all expected. And then, slowly, he folded the paper in half, then in half again, and again, and tucked it into his jacket pocket. For the first time in a long time, he was not going to say what had been planned. He looked up at the crowd, and the words came, slowly at first, but true. Before I say anything about the future, he began, I want to talk about the past, about something I've never spoken about in public, not because I didn't want to, but because I didn't know how. A quiet murmur moved through the room. People shifted in their seats, phones lowered, heads tilted. They weren't used to this version of him, the one who wasn't talking about software or products or innovation. He wasn't reading slides. He was just ... speaking, and that made them listen even closer. Years ago, Sundar continued, when I was just starting out, I met someone who would change everything. Her name is Anjali. Some of you know we've been together since college, but what you don't know is what she gave up for me to be standing here today. The room seemed to grow still. I got an offer that required me to move across the world. And Anjali, who had her own career, her own dreams, made a decision that still humbles me to this day. She left her job, she left her family, she left everything familiar. For me, for a possibility, not a guarantee. Not even a clear path, just ... Hey, maybe. He paused, looked down, took a breath. We lived in a tiny apartment. I worked long hours. We barely had time together. Sometimes I didn't speak to her for days, except for a quick goodbye in the morning and a tired hi at night. And through all of it, she stayed. She stayed even when I became so obsessed with proving myself that I forgot to notice how much. She was holding things together. He looked out into the crowd again, but this time, he wasn't seeing the shadows. He was seeing the truth. The reality of how much love often goes unnoticed in the race for success. One night, he said, his voice lower now, she told me she felt invisible, and she was right. I had been so focused on building a future that I stopped seeing the person who was giving up her present for me. There was a long silence. No one moved. No one whispered. They were listening, not just with their ears, but with their hearts. So I made her a promise, Sundar said. I told her that if I ever had the chance to tell the world, I would. And this is that moment. He looked directly into the front row, and for a second, the strength in his eyes flickered. He saw her, her face, calm, proud, and yet deeply emotional. She had not expected this. Even she didn't know what he was going to say. Anjali, he said, his voice steady but full of feeling. You believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. You gave me everything, and asked for nothing. And I want the world to know I could not have done any of this without you. The audience didn't applaud. Not yet, not because they didn't want to, but because they were holding something bigger than applause. They were holding the weight of his honesty. His humility, the quiet power of gratitude long overdue. And then, after a pause that seemed to stretch across time, he added something no one saw coming. But what I've never told anyone, he said, his voice dropping almost to a whisper, is what happened the night before I joined Google. The words hung in the air. He looked down again, not from shame, but from the gravity of what he was about to share. The air in the auditorium felt different now, tighter, like something unspoken was finally pressing toward the surface. That night, he said slowly, I almost gave up. Asterisk, he looked up again. His eyes were calm, but behind them was the memory of a storm. I had this job offer in front of me. It was everything I had worked for, but I was scared, terrified actually, of failing, of not being enough, of letting her down. I remember staring at the letter and thinking, what if I'm just ordinary? What if all this is too much for me? The audience was still frozen, drawn into the confession unfolding before them. Anjali saw it. Without me saying a word, she saw it in my eyes as she sat down beside me. She didn't say, you'll be great. She didn't say, you have to do this. She just said, I'm with you. No matter what. His voice broke slightly, the only sign of the years of pressure he had carried alone. That one sentence, he said, was the reason I walked into Google the next day. There was silence still, but now it felt full of feeling, full of reflection, full of respect. Finally, Sundar leaned slightly forward and added, I know many of you are chasing dreams, building careers, trying to prove something to the world. But please don't forget the ones who carry you when you're too tired to carry yourself. Success is never a solo journey. And then, just as the first wave of applause began to rise, he paused again. And this time, it wasn't to deliver gratitude. It was to warn. But our story doesn't end there, he said. There was something else. Something we never told anyone. Something that happened later, nearly broke us. The applause stopped before it could begin, and now. Every heart in the room leaned forward. Not just to hear more, but because they sensed something real was coming. Something unexpected. I promised her I would never tell this part. But today, I asked her again, and she nodded. So, I will. His hands were still. His voice was clear. And the next words he spoke would change everything, but then the screen behind him suddenly flickered. A face appeared. Live, not a picture, not a slide, but a real-time video feed. And the audience gasped, because the face on the screen wasn't Sundar. Asterisk, the face on the screen, and the moment that almost destroyed everything for a moment. Time seemed to stop. On the giant screen behind Sundar, a face appeared. Not recorded, not planned. It was live. The camera feed was clear, steady, and unmistakably real. The soft lighting in the frame suggested it was being streamed from somewhere quiet and private. And the face on that screen was Anjali. She looked calm, but only at first glance. Behind her eyes, there was something else, something not yet spoken. The entire auditorium fell into a kind of stunned silence, unsure of what was happening. No one clapped. No one moved. People sat frozen in their seats, holding their breath. This wasn't part of the schedule, not part of the event. But somehow, it was exactly what needed to happen. Sundar turned around slowly, his eyes rising to meet the screen. For a second, he seemed caught between surprise and understanding, as if he had hoped she would speak, but hadn't been sure she ever would. Hello, she said, her voice quiet. But it carried through the speakers like a soft bell ringing through still air. I know I wasn't supposed to be part of this talk, but I think it's time I tell my side. The audience leaned in, both physically and emotionally. It was no longer a tech keynote. It was something deeper, more human. What Sundar just shared with you, she said, is true. All of it. I did leave my job. I did move countries. I did give up my career. But what he didn't say is what that choice really cost. Her voice trembled slightly, not with anger, but with emotion. Not the loud kind, the deep kind. A kind that built slowly, quietly over years. In the beginning, it felt like an adventure. Like something beautiful. We were young, we were in love. We believed we could handle anything. And for a while we did. I supported him every way I could. Cooked, cleaned, budgeted every single dollar. Waited up at night just to hear how his day went. But as time passed, something began to shift. Sundar stood still on stage, not speaking, not interrupting, just listening. Really listening. I stopped recognizing myself, she said. I would look in the mirror and wonder where I had gone. I was no longer an engineer, no longer a contributor. I became background. And Sundar, he didn't mean make me feel that way. He was just trying to survive, but in surviving, we forgot how to live. She paused. You could hear a pin drop in the room. There were nights when he came home and didn't even look me in the eyes. Not because he didn't care, but because he was drowning in pressure. And I didn't know how to help him without drowning too. People in the audience were shifting now, not with boredom, but with discomfort, because they recognized this feeling. Many of them had lived it, were living it. The silent struggle that comes when love and ambition try to share the same space. But the moment that almost broke us, Anjali said, her voice lower now, was when I found something on his computer. A wave of quiet tension passed through the room. It was an email, she continued. Not romantic, not scandalous. But it was heartbreaking in its own way. It was to a mentor of his, and in it he wrote, I'm not sure if I'm strong enough. Maybe she would have been better off without me. Sundar looked down, and I read that. She said, my heart broke. Not because he doubted himself, but because he thought I was suffering because of him. And in that moment, I realized something we had both forgotten, that love isn't just about sacrifice. It's about honesty. And we hadn't been honest with each other in a long, long time. She blinked slowly, holding back the years behind her eyes. So that night, I asked him one question. I said, if you lost everything tomorrow, the job, the title, the company, who would you be? And for the first time, Sundar didn't have an answer. The crowd was still. Each person sitting with their own reflection now. Some thinking about their partners. Others about their own lives. About the things they'd given up. Or the things others had given up for them. That was the night we decided to start over. Anjali said. Not with jobs or goals or resumes, but as two people who loved each other and had forgotten how to show it. Sundar finally spoke. Just one line. Not rehearsed. Not polished. We chose each other again, he said, his voice quiet. Anjali nodded slowly on the screen. Yes. We chose each other. Not the success. Not the image. Not the roles we thought we had to play. Just us. And from that moment, we promised to live differently. Not just for the world, but for ourselves. The audience exhaled. Some literally. Some with tears. Others with thoughts they didn't know how to name. Because what they had just witnessed wasn't a speech. It was a reminder. A mirror. Anjali smiled softly now. A real smile. Not forced. Not for the camera. Just warm. Thank you for listening. She said, thank you for seeing us. Not just as a tech leader and his wife, but as two people who fought hard for each other. And for anyone out there who's struggling in silence, you are not alone. The screen faded to black. Sundar stood still. He didn't speak right away. He didn't need to. The message had landed in every corner of that room, and in hearts far beyond it. Everyone watching from home. Everyone who thought success was the goal, and forgot that love was the foundation. After a long pause, he stepped forward, looked out into the audience, and said only this. And yet, even after we rebuilt, something happened that tested us more than anything before. His voice didn't shake. But it carried weight, real weight. It didn't come from work. It didn't come from outside. It came from inside. From something neither of us saw coming. He stopped, looked out, and it began with a phone call at 2:30 in the morning. Asterisk the 2:38 M call, and the secret that changed their lives forever tonight was thick with silence. Not the peaceful kind. The heavy kind. The kind that clings to the walls of a room and makes the ticking of the clock sound louder than it should. Sundar lay in bed, his arm gently resting over Anjali's shoulder. The two of them had fallen asleep earlier than usual. They were finally in a rhythm again, not just as partners, but as people. They had started having evening walks again, laughing over small things, cooking together, just being there. No roles, no expectations. Just presence. And then at exactly 2:30 a.m., the phone rang. Sundar didn't recognize the number. It was long distance, unfamiliar. He reached for the phone, careful not to wake Anjali. But she stirred anyway, sensing something in his body language. Some shift in the energy of the room. He answered. The voice on the other end was calm. Too calm. Double quotes, Mr. Pichai, the man said. Mrs. Dr. Ravindra from the Central Medical Board. In Chennai, I'm calling regarding your mother. The name hit Sundar like a cold wave. His mother had been living in India all these years. They spoke often, but he hadn't seen her in months. She never complained, never wanted to be a burden. And that was the problem. She never said when something was wrong. What's happened? Sundar asked. Sitting up. Anjali sat up too now, fully awake, sensing the change in the air. We've run some urgent tests. There's something in her scans we need to discuss. We would prefer to do it in person, but we were instructed to call you immediately. Just tell me, Sundar said, his voice thin. She has a rapidly growing mass in the frontal region of the brain, the doctor replied gently. She's refusing treatment until she speaks to you. She's scared, but she won't show it. The line crackled slightly. How much time does she have? Sundar asked, barely breathing. The doctor paused. Without surgery and treatment. A few weeks. Anjali's hand was already on Sundar's. No words, just pressure. Just warmth. Grounding him before the grief could knock him over. The call ended. The room was silent again, but now the silence was louder than any sound. Sundar sat on the edge of the bed, not moving. Anjali leaned her head on his back. Asterisk. We'll go, she said softly. Whatever it takes. But Sundar didn't respond right away. His mind was full, not just with fear, but with guilt. Guilt that he had been so caught up in the world he built. He had missed the cracks forming in the world he came from. They booked the earliest flight. On the plane, Sundar stared out of the window, not really seeing anything. He thought of his mother's hands, how they used to pack his school lunches, how they braided Anjali's hair before their wedding. He thought of how she used to walk, with a slight limp, but never spoke of pain. He thought of the last time they spoke, how she laughed about a television show and asked about his work, never mentioning her headaches when they landed. The air in Chennai was thick and warm, familiar, painful. They went straight to the hospital. Sundar's mother was lying on a bed, smaller than he remembered, fragile in a way that made his chest ache. When she saw him, she smiled, wide and proud, as if nothing was wrong. You've lost weight, she said. So have you, he replied, holding back tears. They talked for hours, about small things, big things, everything in between. But as night fell, she reached out and touched his hand. There's something I need you to do, she said. Sundar leaned in. You must go back, she whispered. Do or work. Don't stop because of me. I'm proud of you. Always. He shook his head. I can't. I won't. Not now. She smiled again, but her eyes said something different. Then let me give you something, she said. From her bedside drawer, she pulled out an old worn letter. The paper was yellowing, folded many times. I wrote this the night you left for America, she said. I never gave it to you. I didn't want you to worry, but now it's yours. Sundar unfolded it slowly. It was written in her familiar handwriting, neat, loving, full of feeling. My son, I know you are afraid. I see it in your eyes, even when you smile. The world you are going into will be hard, harder than anything you've known. But I want you to remember one thing. Your heart is your gift. Do not let success harden it. Do not let the world shape you into someone unrecognizable. Love will carry you further than ambition ever could. And one more thing. Don't forget to look back. Sometimes we leave people behind without realizing it. And sometimes those people are the ones who built the bridge we walked across. You were never alone, and you never will be. Love. The words blurred in Sundar's eyes. He pressed the letter to his chest, silently promising her that he would. Never forget. Njl. I watched all of this unfold, quietly, respectfully. But something was shifting in her. Two, because while they had come for Sundar's mother, Anjali was also carrying a secret. Something she hadn't told him yet. Something that would change. Everything again, but she stayed quiet. Not yet. Not here. Not. While grief was in the room, they spent 3 weeks in India. Doctors, prayers, slow meals. Sundar's mother went through surgery. She survived, but recovery would take time. They flew back home exhausted, emotionally bruised, but still holding on to hope. And then, 2 days later, as the sunlight poured into their kitchen window and the smell of chai filled the room, Anjali sat across from Sundar and finally spoke. I need to tell you something, she said softly. He looked up from his cup, already sensing the weight in her tone. What is it? She took his hand, paused, then said the one sentence that would change everything. I'm pregnant. Asterisk the pregnancy, the fear, and the question no one dared to ask for a long moment. Sundar didn't say anything. He just looked at her, eyes wide, mouth slightly open, holding his breath in the stillness of their quiet kitchen. Outside, birds were singing, soft and distant. The morning sunlight slanted through the window, casting slow-moving shadows across the tiled floor. But inside, time was standing still. Anjali sat across from him, her hand still resting on his. Her expression was unreadable, not fear exactly, but something deeper, something older, a blend of vulnerability and quiet strength. The kind of expression a person wears when they know the road ahead is about to change forever. You're pregnant, Sundar repeated, his voice barely above a whisper. She nodded. Slow, careful. Yes. He leaned back slightly, processing. The word echoed in his head, bouncing between memories and future possibilities. For most people, this news would have come with instant celebration, joy, laughter, maybe even a tearful embrace. But for them, it wasn't that simple. Not now. Not after everything. NJL. I watched him closely, searching his face for a reaction, a sign. Anything that would tell her what he was really feeling beneath the shock. He reached for her other hand, holding both now. How long have you known? He asked gently. A few weeks, she said. I wanted to be sure. And I need the moment to be right. He nodded slowly, understanding even if he didn't yet have the words. There was silence again. Not cold, not distant, just full. Full of everything they didn't know how to say yet. I'm scared, she admitted, eyes glistening. Not because we're not ready, but because I don't want us to lose what we just found again. We fought so hard to come back to each other. And now, everything's about to change. He squeezed her hand. We're going to be okay, he said. But even he could hear the uncertainty in his voice, because the truth was, he was scared too. Not of the baby, not of fatherhood, but of what it might mean for them, for their fragile balance. They had just come through the fire. His mother's illness, the near loss of their relationship, the rebuilding of their connection. And now, another life was entering the story, a new chapter. Beautiful, yes, but unpredictable. That night, Sundar sat alone in the small room they had turned into a study. Anjali was resting, finally asleep after a long, emotionally charged day. The letter from his mother still sat on the desk beside him. He unfolded it again. Read it slowly. Do not let success harden your heart. The words echoed louder now. Fatherhood would demand more of him than any role he'd ever taken, and not in a way that could be measured by titles or accomplishments. It would require presence, softness, patience. It would require a new version of him. Over the next few weeks, things changed. They began preparing, gently, cautiously, with both excitement and nerves. Sundar rearranged his schedule, carving out time in ways he hadn't. Before, meetings were shifted. Late nights became fewer. He made space, not just in his calendar, but in his mind. Anjali, meanwhile, moved through the early stages of pregnancy with grace and quiet strength. But there were moments, fleeting, painful ones, where she would stare out the window. For minutes at a time, her hand resting on her belly, as if trying to make peace with a future she couldn't yet imagine. They talked often, more than they had in years. About baby names, yes. About diapers and doctors and ultrasounds, but also about deeper things. About identity, about sacrifice, about what kind of parents they wanted to be. I don't want our child to grow up thinking success is measured by screens or numbers, Anjali said one evening. I want them to know what kindness looks like, what humility feels like. I want them to see us, really see us, as people, not just rules. Sundar listened, and for once, he didn't try to solve or fix. He just heard her then, one evening. They had dinner with a small group of close friends, some from Sundar's early days at Google, others from Anjali's college years. Laughter filled the room warm and easy, until one friend, perhaps a little too comfortable, asked the question no one had dared ask yet. So, will she go back to work after the baby? The words dropped like a stone into water. NJLI single quotes us fork froze halfway to her plate. Sundar's smile faded just slightly, and the room grew just a touch quieter. The friend didn't mean anything by it, not really. But it was a question that carried weight, because beneath it lay years of assumptions, of judgment, of invisible pressure. Anjali placed her fork down gently. I haven't decided yet, she said, her tone calm but clear. And even if I don't, it doesn't mean I stopped working. It just means the work changed. The response was simple, but the message behind it profound. After the guest left, Sundar turned to her. I'm sorry that question even came up, he said. Don't be, she replied. It reminded me of something I've been meaning to ask you. You looked at her, surprised. Ask me what? She took a breath. When our child is old enough to understand who you are, what you've built, what you've led, what do you want them to remember most about you? The question stunned him. Not because he didn't know the answer, but because he had never stopped long enough to ask it of himself. He sat with it for a long moment. Then, slowly, he answered, I want them to remember that I listened, that I showed up, that I didn't just lead a company. I led with my heart. Anjali smiled, her eyes softening. Then you're already becoming the father you need to be. And just when it felt like they had found peace again, just when it felt like they had reached a safe harbor, the unexpected happened. One morning, Anjali woke up with sharp pain in her side. It was early. Too early. They rushed to the hospital. Hours. Past. Doctors came and went. And then the words no expecting parent ever wants to hear. We may be losing the baby. Asterisk, the hospital room, the silent prayer, and the moment that redefined everything they believe. The hospital walls were too white, too clean, too silent. Sundar sat beside Anjali's bed, his fingers wrapped around hers, unmoving, cold with fear. She was pale, breathing carefully. The monitors beside her beeped steadily, but it was not the rhythm that comforted him. It was the rise and fall of her chest. Outside the room, nurses walked quickly. Doctors spoke in low tones, but inside, time had slowed to a crawl. It was supposed to be a morning like any other. They were supposed to go for a walk, eat breakfast together, maybe read the baby name book again. But instead, they were here in this sterile room filled with quiet dread. A few hours earlier, Anjali had woken with a sharp pain on her left side, followed by bleeding. Her hand had instinctively gone to her belly, and her voice had cracked as she called out Sundar's name. He had never moved so fast in his life. The drive to the hospital had been silent except for her soft gasps and the voice in his head whispering, Not now, please not now. The doctor finally entered the room. He was calm, his eyes kind but direct. Sundar stood up immediately, heart pounding so hard it felt like it might break through his chest. The doctor didn't speak right away. He pulled up a chair, sat down beside them, and said something Sundar didn't expect. Before I explain, the scans, I just want to say, I've seen many couples come through this room. Some are held together by fear, others by love. It's clear to me which one you are. Sundar nodded, unsure how to respond. The doctor continued. There is a partial detachment of the placenta. It's serious but not hopeless. We're at a crossroads. If we act quickly, strict bed rest, close monitoring, emotional care, we can give the pregnancy a chance. But you both need to understand, this will not be easy. Emotionally, physically, it will demand everything. Anjali spoke before Sundar could. We'll do whatever it takes. And so began the next chapter of their journey, not one of boardrooms or speeches, but of quiet battles fought hour by hour, day by day. They turned their home into a sanctuary. Sundar canceled everything. No press, no meetings, no flights. The world could wait. His world was now here, beside her, on that bed, where each heartbeat was a victory. He cooked for her, breathed to her, held her hand through sleepless nights when fear crept in like fog. There were moments when they laughed because they needed to. There were moments when they cried because they had to. And in the middle of it all, Sundar began to write, not emails, not strategy memos, but letters. One for his mother, one for his unborn child, and one for Anjali. He wrote the last one on a quiet Wednesday afternoon while she napped beside him. It was not a long letter, just a few pages, but every word was chosen with care. NJL, I used to think the world needed my ideas, my vision, my drive, but now I see what the world needs more of is love like yours. Quiet love. Patient love. The kind of love that doesn't ask for attention, but gives everything it has. Watching you carry this life, even through fear, even through pain. It has changed me more than any title ever could. If this baby makes it into the world, I want them to know what kind of woman their mother is. And if we lose this child, I want you to know that I will carry you through that pain, just as you carried me through mine. I didn't marry you for what you gave up. I married you for what you held on to, your soul, your fire, your grace. I am yours. Always. Sundar folded the letter and slipped it into the drawer beside her bed. He didn't need her to read it right away. Some words are meant to wait, and then, just when it seemed like the worst might be over, the bleeding returned. They were back in the hospital. The machines louder this time, the staff more focused. Anjali was weak, pale, but not broken. Sundar stayed by her side, whispering to her even as she drifted in and out of sleep. And then, somewhere between midnight and dawn, it happened. A tiny, rapid heartbeat filled the room. Not Anjali's, not Sundar's, but there's. The baby, single quotes, just. Strong. Alive. The doctor smiled for the first time in days. Your baby's holding on, he said. They're a fighter. Weeks passed. The pregnancy remained fragile, but hope grew stronger each day. And finally, in the quiet hours of a cool morning, surrounded by soft music and dim lights, Anjali gave birth to a baby girl. Sundar held her in his arms and cried, not the quiet tears of polite joy, but the deep, shaking kind that come when the soul is finally allowed to breathe again. They named her Diya, meaning light, because that's what she was, a light born of silence and storms, of fear and faith, of sacrifice and love. And the months that followed, Sundar returned to work. But everything was different. Not in the way he spoke, but in the way he listened. Not in how he led, but in how he served. He started a quiet initiative within the company, not publicized, not flashy. It offered support to the partners of employees who had given up their own careers to support others. He called it the Bridge Program, a way to honor those who made silent sacrifices. And in one speech, months later, at another major event, he told the world, what we build is only as strong as the love that supports it. I once believed my work would define my legacy. Now I know my legacy is what I build at home with the ones who held me when no one was watching. The audience applauded, but Sundar wasn't thinking about them. He was thinking of the day. Anjali told him she was pregnant. The hospital room. The letter, the heartbeat, and the quiet sound of his daughter breathing softly against his chest.
a sound more powerful than any applause.